All right, let's dive deep today. We're looking at how to build a website. One that's got that distinct BuzzFeed vibe, but with an Aussie twist, of course.
Okay.
You sent over this blog post from Now Technology System.
Yeah.
They're an Australian web design company, and it's pretty interesting. It's packed with good info.
Yeah.
So our goal today is to figure out what it really takes to build a site that not only looks trendy, but will actually be successful in the Australian market.
It's interesting because we're not trying to just copy BuzzFeed exactly, right?
Right.
We want to figure out what makes it work so well.
Mm-hmm.
Like all that engaging content and stuff that people love to share,
Yeah.
and how we can tweak that to really resonate with an Aussie audience.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
I think this blog post has some good advice on how to do that.
Totally.
Yeah.
So first things first, what platform are we even going to build this Aussie BuzzFeed on? The source really pushes for WordPress. And I can see why. I've played around with building websites before, and WordPress always seemed pretty user-friendly.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the best things about it.
Yeah.
It's it's easy to use even if you don't know how to code, which is great.
Right?
But it can also handle some pretty complex websites too, so it's powerful.
Oh, cool.
And the best part is, because it's open source, there's so many plugins and themes you can use.
Why?
It's like a giant app store, but for your website.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you want to add a feature that you've seen on BuzzFeed,
Uh-huh.
there's probably a plugin out there that can do it.
That's awesome. Like you have this whole team of developers at your beck and call.
Basically, yeah.
Okay, but before we get too carried away with plugins and stuff, we need to lay the foundation first.
Right.
So the source really stresses picking the right domain name
Yeah.
and a good hosting provider. They actually recommend going with a local Australian company like Ostomain or Ventre IP.
Yeah.
Why is that? What's the advantage there?
Yeah. Okay, so think about it this way. When someone in Australia tries to look at your website,
Yeah.
their request has to go all the way to wherever your server is.
Oh, okay.
So if that's in, say, America,
Right.
it has to travel a really long way.
Makes sense.
But if your server is here in Australia,
Uh-huh.
it's much faster. So your website loads quicker for the people you want to see it.
Got it. And nobody wants to wait around for a slow website these days.
Exactly. We're all impatient,
Right. Instant gratification.
pretty much.
The source also mentioned that local hosting companies are usually more familiar with Australian regulations,
Yeah.
which could help you avoid some headaches later on.
Definitely.
Okay, now for the fun part. How do we make it look like BuzzFeed?
Right.
The source recommends themes like Bimber or Newsmag as good starting points.
I think those are good choices. They're made for websites with a lot of content
Yeah,
and that rely on visuals,
Mm.
just like BuzzFeed.
right.
So you'll get things like those big image layouts,
That-
bold headlines, and built-in social sharing buttons, all those things that make it look like BuzzFeed.
Speaking of visuals, the source really emphasizes using responsive design.
Yes.
They even say, make sure your theme looks good on all devices,
Yep.
from phones to desktops. And that's important because everyone's on their phone all the time these days.
Right.
But what does responsive actually mean in practice? Like, what does that look like?
Okay, so imagine you're trying to look at a website on your phone.
Yeah.
And the text is super tiny.
Yeah.
The images are all cut off.
Oh.
And you have to pinch and zoom just to read anything. That's a website that isn't responsive.
Ugh. Yeah, I hate that.
A responsive website will adjust to the size of the screen.
Okay.
So the layout changes, the text gets bigger,
Oh, cool.
and everything just works, whether you're on a phone, a tablet, or a desktop.
So it's all about making sure everyone has a good experience.
Exactly.
No matter what they're using to look at your website.
Yes.
That makes sense. Okay, so we've got the theme, which gives us the basic look, right?
What if you want to go beyond that and
Yeah.
really make it your own? What can you do?
You can customize it. WordPress has something called the Customizer,
Okay.
which lets you tweak fonts, colors, and the basic layout. It's pretty easy to use, even for beginners.
Right.
But if you want more control, you can use a page builder like Elementor or WP Bakery.
Page builders. Those sound interesting. How do they work?
Basically, they let you design your website visually.
Okay.
You can drag and drop different things like blocks of content, images, videos, and you don't need to know any code.
Wow. So it's kind of like building with Legos.
Yeah, kinda.
That's cool. Are there any downsides to using a page builder, though?
That's a good question. Some of them can add extra code to your website, which might slow things down a little.
Okay.
But a lot of the newer ones are designed to be lightweight.
Right.
So it's really about finding the right balance.
Got it. You might have to do some research and figure out which one's best for your site.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about the platform, the design, and how to customize it. What else is important for our Aussie BuzzFeed?
Plugins. You need plugins.
Yeah.
They're like apps that add different features to your website.
Okay.
And there are tons of them out there.
Cool.
This blog post mentions a few that I think are especially relevant for what we're trying to do.
Okay, yeah.
Jetpack, for instance, is pretty popular.
What does that one do?
It helps with website performance, security, and tracking your traffic.
Oh, wow. All of that.
Yeah, it's got a lot of features.
Okay, those all sound important, but honestly, we're building an Aussie BuzzFeed here.
Right.
We need to make this thing go viral.
Yeah.
So what about social media? How do we make sure people can share our content?
Yeah, definitely. You want people to be able to easily share things on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter,
Yeah.
all the places where Australians are online.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a plugin for that called Social Warfare.
Okay.
It adds those social sharing buttons to your website,
Cool.
which makes it super easy for people to share stuff.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've covered the platform, the look of the site, the plugins, but what about the actual content?
Ah, yes, that's important.
That's the heart of any good BuzzFeed site.
Right.
What's the secret to making it really engaging and shareable?
Well, it's about figuring out what Australians are into, what makes them laugh, what makes them think,
Yeah.
what makes them want to share things with their friends, like those funny little Aussie sayings,
Yeah.
the slang, the shared experiences that bring people together. That's what's going to work.
I like that. So it's about really capturing the essence of Australian culture
Yeah.
and weaving it into the content of the website. So instead of like generic listicles like 10 things you didn't know about coffee,
Right.
we could do something like 10 Aussie slang words that'll make you sound like a true blue.
Exactly.
Or instead of a quiz called which celebrity are you,
Right.
it could be which Aussie icon are you.
Yes, perfect.
Those little tweaks
Yeah.
to make it more Australian.
Exactly. Those little things make a difference.
Yeah, for sure. But it's not just about being funny or quirky, right?
No,
We also need to understand how Australians actually use the internet.
that's right.
What are they looking for?
Well, one thing I've noticed is that Australians love visuals.
Okay.
They're very visual people.
Yeah.
So using images, videos, GIFs, and even things like interactive polls,
Uh-huh.
that's really important. BuzzFeed does this really well.
Makes sense. People's attention spans are so short these days.
Yeah.
You have to grab their attention quickly.
Right.
And visuals are a great way to do that.
Exactly. But you don't want to just throw random pictures and videos on your website.
No.
You need to be strategic about it.
Right.
And that's where data comes in.
Yeah.
Things like Google Analytics can help you figure out what kind of content people respond to,
Okay.
what they're searching for,
Yeah.
how they're using your website,
Uh-huh.
and you can use that information to make better content.
So it's like a mix of creativity and data.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's really interesting. It's like a science to it, but also an art.
Yeah,
But even with the best content in the world, it doesn't matter if nobody sees it.
right.
How do we get people to actually visit our Aussie BuzzFeed site?
That, my friend, is the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And it's something we'll dive into more in the next part of this deep dive.
Okay, I can't wait.
Stay tuned.
Okay. Okay, so before we get too caught up in all the fun stuff, like
Wow.
cat videos and viral quizzes,
Yeah.
there's one more kind of technical thing I wanted to ask about.
Okay.
The source mentioned that now technology systems, they're really proud of making sure that websites are, quote, compliant with Australian standards.
Uh-huh.
What's that actually mean when you're building a website?
It's super important, actually.
Okay.
It basically means you have to make sure your website follows all the Australian laws and regulations,
Sure.
especially the ones for online businesses,
Right.
things like your privacy policy.
Yep.
So how you collect and use people's data, especially with all the new privacy laws here in Australia,
Right. Right.
and those cookie notices you see everywhere,
Yeah.
and making sure your website is accessible to everyone.
So it's not just about making the site look good and having great content.
Nope.
You have to be a responsible website owner too.
Exactly.
So that's probably where a company like Now Technology Systems could really help out.
Yeah,
They would know all the legal ins and outs.
exactly. They can make sure you've got everything covered legally.
Right. Peace of mind.
Exactly.
Okay. But let's get back to that question we were talking about before.
Yeah,
How do we actually get people to visit our website once it's up and running?
right.
What are some good ways to drive traffic and get people engaged, especially in Australia?
Well, we talked about social media a bit earlier,
Yeah.
and I can't stress enough how important that is.
Okay.
You really need to be active on the platforms where your audience is.
Right.
So for Australia, that's Facebook, Instagram, maybe even TikTok, depending on who you're trying to reach.
Right.
But it's not just about posting links to your articles.
No.
You need to create content specifically for those platforms.
Yeah.
Content that's engaging and makes people want to share it.
So each platform's kind of different.
Yeah, they all have their own vibe.
Right, like a different language almost.
Kinda.
Okay, what about email marketing?
Yeah.
The source mentioned that as a key strategy.
Yes.
Is that still a thing? Does anyone even use email anymore?
They do. It's still one of the best ways to build a loyal audience.
Okay.
And keep people coming back to your website. It's like a direct line to your most engaged readers.
I get that, but I've seen so many websites with those annoying pop-ups like sign up for our newsletter. It feels kind of spammy.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
So how do you do email marketing without being annoying?
You have to offer something valuable
Okay.
and respect people's time.
Right.
So instead of sending out generic updates all the time, offer something exclusive, like early access to content or special discounts.
Okay.
Maybe some behind-the-scenes stuff.
Right, make them feel special.
Yeah.
It's not like they're being spammed.
Right.
Okay, and while we're on the topic of providing value, what about SEO?
Ah, yes, SEO.
I hear that acronym all the time, but I'm not always sure what it means.
SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization.
Okay.
And it's basically about making sure your website shows up in search results.
Oh, okay.
When people are looking for things related to your content.
Right, because when I want to find something online, I just Google it.
Exactly. That's what everyone does.
Okay, so how do we make sure our Aussie BuzzFeed site shows up when people Google things?
First, you need to figure out what people are searching for. What words are they using? What questions are they asking?
Right.
Then you can optimize your website's content to include those keywords and answer those questions.
Okay, so it's like you're trying to match what people are searching for.
Yeah, basically.
Isn't that a bit manipulative, though? Like tricking Google into ranking our website higher?
It's not about tricking Google.
Okay.
It's about making sure your website is structured in a way that search engines can understand.
Okay.
Think of it like a giant library with millions of books.
Uh-huh.
You need a way to organize it, right?
Right, a system.
SEO is like creating a catalog system for your website.
Okay, that makes sense.
So Google can easily find and categorize your content.
So it's about making our website easy for Google to understand.
Exactly.
Okay, what are some practical things we can do to improve our SEO then?
There's a lot to it, but some basics include using relevant keywords in your page titles,
Okay.
headings, and image descriptions.
Got it.
Making sure your website is mobile-friendly
Right.
and getting backlinks from other reputable websites.
Backlinks? What are those? They sound kind of dodgy.
Not at all. They're just links from other websites to yours. Think of it like a vote of confidence.
Yeah.
If lots of other websites are linking to your content, Google sees that as a good sign.
So it's like you're building up your credibility
Exactly.
in the eyes of Google.
Yes.
Okay, so how do you get backlinks? Do you have to beg other websites to link to you?
No, it's not about begging.
Okay.
It's about creating content that's so good, other websites naturally want to link to it.
Okay.
What kind of content would be valuable to your audience?
Right.
Maybe an infographic they'd want to share, or a guest post for another website in your niche.
So you're creating content that's so good people can't help but share it.
Yeah, that's the goal.
That's a good challenge.
It is.
Now, we talked about creating content specifically for Australians.
Right.
Are there any other content strategies we should keep in mind?
Well, one thing BuzzFeed does really well is using lots of different media in their content.
Okay.
They use images, GIFs, videos, even quizzes and polls, just to keep things interesting and engaging. And they're not afraid to experiment with different formats.
Yeah, they try new things all the time.
Exactly. They see what works and what doesn't.
And that's what keeps things fresh.
Yes. It's not just the same old articles and blog posts over and over.
Right.
It's interactive. It's visual.
It's BuzzFeed.
It is.
Okay, so we've talked about the technical stuff, driving traffic and creating content.
Yeah.
What's next on our deep dive journey?
Well, now that we've got a good understanding of the basics, I think it's time to get a little more philosophical.
Okay.
What does it actually mean to create a successful website in Australia?
Ooh, I like where this is going.
What are those intangible things that make a website stand out?
Let's get philosophical. So we've talked about all the technical parts of building a website.
Yeah.
But what about the heart of it?
Right.
How do you make a website that really connects with Aussies?
I think it comes down to being authentic.
Okay.
Australians can tell when something's fake.
Yeah, for sure.
They can spot a phony from a mile away.
Totally. So how do we make sure our website feels genuinely Australian?
Well, one thing is,
Yeah.
you got to understand the Aussie sense of humor.
Yeah.
It's dry, it's self-deprecating, often a bit ironic.
Right.
It's not always about being laugh-out-loud funny.
Yeah.
It's more about a subtle kind of wit that Australians appreciate.
Right. It's like an inside joke.
Yeah, exactly.
Like something you'd share with your mates.
That's a good way to put it.
And speaking of mates, there's that strong sense of community here in Australia, right?
Oh, absolutely. Aussies value mateship.
Yeah.
And feeling like they belong.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true online as well.
Makes sense.
A good website should encourage that sense of community, whether it's through comments, forums, or even just the tone of the writing.
So it's about making people feel like they're part of something?
Exactly, like they're part of a tribe.
I like that. And I think there's also like a certain irreverence in Australian culture.
Oh, that's a good point.
Like we don't take ourselves too seriously.
Yeah, Aussies aren't afraid to poke fun at authority, to challenge things, to be a bit cheeky.
Mm-hmm.
And that should definitely come through on your website.
So it's about being playful, maybe a bit rebellious.
Yeah.
Not afraid to push some boundaries.
Exactly.
It's like capturing that larrikin spirit.
Exactly.
Okay, so the source we've been looking at, this blog post from Now Technology Systems, it focuses a lot on the technical side of building a website.
It does.
But I feel like there's this underlying message about the importance of local expertise.
I agree. They talk a lot about understanding the Australian market, tailoring your website to Australians.
Yeah.
And that's where that local knowledge comes in.
It's about knowing what makes Australians tick.
Right.
What they care about, what they find funny,
Yeah.
what they're passionate about.
Breaks them angry.
Yeah, understanding all those little nuances that make Australia unique.
Exactly.
And it's not just about understanding the audience. It's about really appreciating Australian culture.
Yes.
Being able to weave those cultural references into your website.
Those Aussie stories.
Exactly.
That's what makes it special.
So it's not enough to just copy what BuzzFeed's doing in America.
No, definitely not.
We have to make it our own.
You got to put your own Aussie spin on it.
I love that. This has been a really interesting deep dive.
It has.
We've covered so much.
Yeah, we have.
The technical stuff, the creative side of things. And even like the philosophy behind building a website that works for Australians.
We went from the nuts and bolts to the heart and soul.
And I think the biggest takeaway for me is that it's not just about building a website.
Right.
It's about building a community.
Yes.
A space where Australians can connect with each other.
Exactly.
Share their stories and celebrate their culture.
That's a great way to put it.
That's pretty exciting.
It is.
So to everyone out there who wants to launch their own Aussie BuzzFeed, go for it. Use your local knowledge. Be creative, and let's show the world what Australia is all about.
And remember, the internet's always changing.
Right.
So don't be afraid to experiment. Try new things.
Yeah.
You never know. You might create the next big thing.
What a great note to end on. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
And to all our listeners, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.